Okay, welcome to the Northlight Workshop. Yes, thank you. Northlight is a library created by these people, and over the years it has become known for its stability, its rock solid code, its well integrated use into the media tool app, and generally never failing the developer or causing any problems. It is also known for revolutionizing the drop down into the drop up, or throw up as some people call it. Anyways, it's impossible to pinpoint any specific individual who is responsible for these bugs. Either way, it does not matter, because the point of this workshop is to knowledge spread and transfer the ownership of this one individual into the entire team, which is you guys. Yes. So, this is what this workshop will cover, more or less. We have a lot of points to go through. It's going to be a somewhat high-level overview of Northlight. Gonna go over the documentation, the repository, a lot of that stuff, but we're also going to go very much in detail. It's gonna be a lot of just me talking, and you may at any point interrupt me to ask any question. And this workshop is planned for 2 hours. We'll see exactly how long it takes, but it will not take more than 2 hours. That's a maximum. And there will be a 10-minute break after 1 hour. Yes. Just gonna check if there was any question. Ahmad, game you wrote.
You're not sharing your screen.
I'm not sharing my screen. That's amazing. Thank you for mentioning that.
Then you have to do all the.
Okay.
You need to do it again.
So yeah, yeah. So you missed the introduction to Northlight and how stable it is, but
There was a joke.
yes, there was. Okay. What does Northlight solve? Well, Northlight is a very complex library. It's a UI library, it's a state management library, it's a design token library, it's a front-end utility library. Really, the point of Northlight is to streamline everything that is related to UI development. And that's a very important thing to mention. Northlight is not exist to give you freedom, it exists to constrain you. It consists to take away your freedom as a developer, to not let you style things how you want to style them, but to style them in the media tool way, so that everyone will style things using the same styles and write UI the same way. That's the main point of Northlight. Also, Northlight is not media tool specific. Northlight is an open source library, which means that everything that goes into Northlight must be able to be used in any company context. That means that if a component only makes sense in the media tool application, it should not go into Northlight. Also, I want to say that Northlight is not core UI, because where do we put reusable UI components that we do not put in Northlight? We put them in core UI. So that's probably the first question I want to bring up. When do we put something in core UI, and when do we put something in Northlight? Well, if it does not make sense for any arbitrary company to use, it does not go into Northlight. It has to be very arbitrary and generic. And if it is a strongly complex UI that composes multiple other UI components, it does also not go into Northlight. For example, a pagination component might make sense for a lot of companies to use in a lot of different applications, but it's a rather complex UI component that composes multiple other components, such as arrow buttons, icon buttons, and logic there in between, that every company wants to do slightly differently. Northlight is meant to be more of a baseline UI design system. And that's also one thing to note, is that Northlight is meant to be finished. It's meant to be stable. And so I want to say that Northlight components should be reusable. They should be, like you, generic. That's one thing, that's the key takeaway from this first bullet point, which is that Northlight is supposed to be reusable for any company, generic, every single component in Northlight. Okay, let's talk about the structure of the Northlight repository. So, I'm going to go into the GitHub for Northlight. And the first thing I want to show you is, the first thing I want to tell you is that all of you should have Northlight repo locally copied onto your own computer. You should all have it locally so that you can work with it, of course. I'm going to show you the structure of the Northlight repo. So don't mind my terminal. I add a lot of green color because I think it looks nice. Yes, let's walk through the Northlight repository. It's split into 4 main parts: tokens, icons, framework, and docs. The most interesting one is the framework. This is where the UI lib is in of itself. But it's also very important to note the tokens repository and the icons repository, where all the design tokens are handled and the Northlight icons are handled, as well as the documentation folder. Now, I think I will start by going over the documentation. So, if you go into the Northlight GitHub, you will see a link here that goes to the Northlight documentation. Here you will see this very fancy page that I hope that you have all seen, the main Northlight docs. What I want to walk through and explain are the 4 main splits in which the documentation has been split upon and how to use them. So that's point 2. Firstly, we have icons. Very simple. It's just a list of icons. It shows them. You have 2 sets of icons. You have Duo and Solid. Here are all the icons you can use, and you can search through them here. Secondly, tokens. This is the main tokens table you want to use. Whenever you need to use a token in the sketches, it will say which token to use. You can go into this page and you can search through all the tokens that are available from Northlight. And I will go over tokens more in depth later, but tokens are basically Northlight's way of saving different styles, colors into aliases, variables that we can reuse. And you can also sort these tokens by specific categories to find exactly what token you need. And then I want to talk a little bit about reference pages and guide pages. So every single component in Northlight, or at least every component in Northlight, should have a reference page. And this reference page is auto-generated, and it is auto-generated. There is also a guide page, which are more blog-like examples of Northlight. I want to recommend you all that you all take a good look into the documentation, that you look through these components. It's very good to have in memory. And also, I want to tell people to use the search bar, which is available if you press Command K, or if you click here, to search through anything in Northlight related to any component. And if I, for example, search for a component like form, I will find both the guide page to the form and the reference page to the form. And to clarify, the difference is that the reference page is auto-generated with things like what props to use, and the guide page is manually written documentation. I want to talk about how the reference pages are built, because this workshop is not only about teaching you how to use Northlight, it's also about how to change Northlight, so you guys know how to maintain it. And so one of the things I want to talk about is how this documentation is auto-generated, because this is one thing that's very important with Northlight is that everything has to be documented. It's probably the only library in Media Tool that is actually properly documented. Yes? Okay. So, every component in Northlight should have a JSDoc comment. It is displayed above the actual component definition, as you can see here. A JSDoc comment is a very specific way of writing comments in JavaScript, and it's using this double asterisk notation. Now, all of these comments are later on going to be parsed by a build script, which is in Northlight docs package.json. You can find a definition here where it will call the file generate documentation.js. Don't need to go into that, but it basically finds the paths where all the files are. It reads the stringified version of the file, and it parses and it passes it to React Docgen TypeScript, where it then later on passes it to a reference page component that builds the page. You can use or write this documentation by following the guideline that is here. So I want to show you guys by running this locally. So I am right now on the master branch of Northlight, as you can see with my fancy UI here. And I am going to run in the Northlight docs. This is booting up the Northlight documentation locally, and all the steps to booting up the Northlight repo is in the GitHub. That's also a very common question. How do I actually start developing in Northlight? You can run through these steps. So you go into the docs directory and you run yarn nx dev. Then you go into the framework directory and you run yarn transpile watch. And then you go back into the docs directory and you do yarn transpile :watch. Now this is very cumbersome to have to write 3 things to actually boot up Northlight. This is one thing that probably or hopefully will come to change soon, but right now everyone is so lazy, including me. It has just been this way for some months. So I will have this URL, localhost 5173, and right now it's broken because I probably did some stupid shit right before this workshop. So I'm just gonna remove the node modules and restart. Yep, and I want to go into the button component. So this is the reference page for the button, and you will have compiled code sandbox examples that you can edit to use. And if I now go into the button JSDoc, I can make any edit I want. So I will just add change create folder to create file, and it's going to update it live. So takeaway from this is whenever you develop in Northlight, you have to run these 3 commands to actually boot up the local sandbox, and every component has these comments that create this auto-generated documentation. Whenever you want to try out or test something in Northlight, you can change these comments to see how it works when you try that out. Okay, next point, the Northlight documentation. Yes, went through that. Yes. Okay, let's talk about CSS or the Chakra style system. So, Chakra has its own style system, which is basically Chakra's way of writing CSS. Every component in Chakra, which I forgot to mention, Northlight is based on Chakra UI, but yes. Every component in Chakra UI has this thing called a style prop. What are style props? Well, they are basically a property that defines some CSS in a quick shorthand. For example, you have things like margin, padding, all this stuff. One thing to mention about style props is that they often come in both a shorthand property and a longer property. So you can write something as margin is equal to 2, but you can also, for example, write, this was not editable, margin, you can write M, or you can write out fully margin. And the consensus for how we write our Northlight code in MediaTool is that we always use the shorthand property. So, yes, please always write the shorthand version. And you can find the shorthand version in the Chakra UI documentation for style props. But you can also find it in the reference. There is one here called a book guide on style props, which is just every single style prop that you can pass to every Chakra component.
Okay.
Sorry, would it be possible to remove from TypeScript from the type that we don't accept the longhand versions? We only accept shorthand versions then?
Yeah, that could be possible.
Can't we do it the other way around, or?
Yeah, I mean, this is...
Why are we doing shorthand versions?
It was a decision made by Paolo, I think, when we first started developing the design system, and that's just the way we've been rolling since. Okay. So it's just a preference, and it's just to keep consistent.
I like that.
I think it was by Kevin.
Yeah, so by Kevin. Yes, style props. Very interesting. One thing I want to talk about is Chakra UI's style configs. So basically, Chakra UI has its own kind of style sheet, which is very important because every component in Northlight has its own Chakra style sheet. So for example, if I go into the button component, I will find under theme/button, I will find a style sheet that looks a little bit like CSS, but it's actually a JavaScript object that is later on parsed by Chakra and put into the Chakra theme. It contains the styling that you want to use for your component. So you will have things like a base style, which will define things such as border radius, color, padding, all that kind of styling. And it will also have stuff for different properties. So for example, you can see that for the small size of button, we want to use these specific stylings. And here we can also find all the styles for the specific variants of the button. And how is this style sheet actually consumed into the component? Well, it's consumed using the use style config hook. So the Chakra UI has a hook called use style config. And if I, for example, go into file picker, which is a custom component, I will find it here. I use multi-style config. A multi-style config is a style config meant to work for multiple components. So let me show you the style config for file picker, for example. This is the style sheet for file picker, and as you can see, in this case it composes multiple components: file picker, file item, multi-file picker, and it has separate styles for each of these. And then these styles will be basically exported from this hook, and they can later on be passed on to the component like this. So Chakra UI has its own style sheets. They are used for every Northlight component. They are consumed via the use style config or use multi-style config hooks. This is done in the background for the components already exported by Chakra UI. And for every new component that you make in Northlight, or for every change you make to a Northlight exclusive component, it comes manually using the use style config hook. So that's how you write your styles, and that's how you change your styles for Northlight components. Okay, I'm noticing that I'm probably missing a lot of points that I want to talk through, so we'll see. Anyways, moving on. One question I got from my dear coworker Alexandros was, how the fuck do I change the width of date picker / date range picker? And the answer to that question is layout components. What is a layout component? Well, there is a principle in Northlight, and that principle is that every component should always have width full, height full, and full is just chakra token for 100%. So every component should always have 100% width and 100% height. And the reason for this is because then it works very nicely with layout components. And layout components is something that Chakra UI, that comes from Chakra UI. It's a list of components. It's box, center, container, flex, grid, simple grid, stack, wrap, H-stack, V-stack, and also aspect ratio. And these components should always be used to define the width and height of whatever you want to contain your components in. So for example, you should never set a width on a date picker component itself. You should always wrap it in a layout component and set the width and height on that layout component to have that work in responsive layouts. Now there are some different layout components. Most notably, my favorite is stack, H-stack and V-stack, which I think a lot of you have used. You can read through this yourself, but they are to create column layouts, horizontal layouts, and stuff like that. One I want to mention is wrap. It's pretty good, especially for responsive layouts. Don't forget about it. Basically what wrap does is that if width runs out, it will start to stack items on the next row. Very useful for responsive stuff. One thing I also want to mention is shout out to the center component, because yes, Northlight also solves the age-old question, how do I center my div? It does it by saying that you wrap whatever you want to center in a center. Yes. Another shout out I want to make is to the spacer component. Basically, if you have two things and you want to put as much space as possible, which is very useful in certain horizontal layouts, you can add a spacer in between those two items, and it will basically add as much space as possible. Yes, Alexandros.
Is there any benefit to using spacer rather than doing space between?
Yes, if you have multiple spacers, say, then that can be easier to manage.
So if you want like two components on left side and then one on
Exactly.
right side. Okay.
That's a good use case for spacer. Layout components, yes. Okay, moving on from layout components, let's talk about typography components. And the main takeaway I want to talk about when it comes to typography components is to not use text. This is one of the main problems I see a lot, and it goes directly into what I mentioned in the beginning of Northlight. The purpose of Northlight is not to give you freedom, it's to take away it from you. So basically, we don't want you to use text component and style it however you want. We want you to use the predefined typography components that we have made for you, so that we all use the same typography throughout the app. Yes, if you really have to use text, then that's okay. In some cases you have to. What typography components are available? There is a typography page. I recommend that you all read it. It goes over all the typography components you can use. We have body text, p-tag, labels, stylized different text around here, labels, we have numvals. Two things I want to mention about typography components that is a bit special. First thing, they can have a bit of a weird width sometimes. Specifically the label component. This is due to some bad decisions that was made very early on. Basically, the easy way to solve this is that you wrap your typography component or label component in a layout component and then you set the width to be something like fit content or minimum content. So, quick tip if you have problems with typography component width. Second thing, also a very common thing, is how do I override the styling of my typography component? Well, you do not do it via style props as usual, but you do it via SX prop. So that is how you apply correctly typography styling to your component. Also, one thing I want to mention is highlighting. Also a very common thing. I have a body of text and I want to highlight a specific part of it. For example, maybe in this example, do you really want to delete in red text or bold text? Well, Chakra UI actually has a solution for this, and that solution is highlight or mark. So if you go to the Chakra UI documentation, you will see that there is a highlight component, and this highlight component you can wrap around your text and apply certain styles such as extra border, such as extra font width, or other stylings. And you can also use the mark component to apply certain styling in your typography component. So please use those, highlight and mark, whenever you want to make one single text or words or collection of words specifically stylized as opposed to the entire sentence or whatever text you are going with. Yes, John?
Is that highlight exported by Northlight as well?
Yes, everything in Chakra UI, or everything I think, is re-exported by Northlight. So you should be able to import it directly from Northlight.
Okay.
If it's not re-exported, don't use it. It's
Yeah.
probably for a reason.
If it's not re-exported, yes. Also, very important thing to mention: never import anything directly from Chakra UI. Always import from Northlight. The reason is we want to maybe one day change it, or at least we want to have the option to. We want to contain that abstraction within Northlight. Of course, it's not exactly the perfect implementation because we still depend on Chakra UI in a lot of ways. But in the end, remember that we always import from Northlight. And if something is really missing from Northlight that is in Chakra UI, you can yourself add it in Northlight and put up a PR for it. Okay, let's talk about some specific Northlight components that have caused some confusion. Main thing I want to talk about is select. And the main thing I want to talk about select is how it is built and how to customize it. So our select component is built on top of Chakra React Select, which in turn is built on top of React Select. Now, if you Google React Select, it's a very popular library for handling select components in React. And if you Google Chakra React Select, you will also find documentation for Chakra React Select. One important thing to mention about Chakra React Select is that it is not the official Chakra Select component. If you go into the Chakra UI documentation, you will find that Chakra UI has a select component. It's not the one we use. The one we use is another. It's a custom select component developed by this one guy, CS Andman. The reason why is because Chakra UI's select component kind of sucks, or at least it does not have all the stuff that we want it to, and they are going to make a better select component that has been in the pipeline for like forever. I don't think it has released yet. But anyways, at the point at which we made a select component, this was the best solution available. And that's very important to know, because when you work with the select component, you may read the React Select documentation, and you may pass a prop, and it may not work. And the reason might be because Chakra React Select does things slightly differently. And so, it's very important that when you read the documentation, you read it in the right priority. So if you are wondering how to do something with the Northlight select, you should always reference the Northlight documentation firsthand, which gives you some basic stuff on select. Usually it's not enough. In that case, you should use the Chakra React select by this one dude. Secondly, to see stuff, how you customize stuff, so like chakra styles and components. And thirdly, lastly, you should refer to the actual React select documentation. And that's the order in which you should go. One thing I want to mention is that the two most common things you have to do with the select is customize its components or change the styles in some way. And the way you do that is via the components prop. So the way React select works is that it composes the select component into multiple different components, into all of these components actually. But it's actually not all of these components because Chakra React select changes it in some way. But mostly these components, and the way you override it is via the components prop. So you will see that the select has a components prop where you can override, for example, the control component, which I think is the main component of select, and you can change its behavior and render whatever you want. And you can also change the styling of these components using the Chakra styles prop. So for example, in the select component, we have Chakra styles here. This goes to custom select styles. Custom select styles goes to here, where we define our custom Northlight styling for our components, which you can override. Yes, let's talk a little bit about flip button. I just want to mention that flip button exists and it's like the coolest component ever. Basically, it's a radio or a checkbox, but it looks nice. So you have a radio that you can select an option in between, and you have a checkbox that you can select multiple items. The main thing I want to mention about flip button is also how you customize it, because in a lot of cases you use the flip button, but you want to customize what is actually rendered inside of the flip button. And the way you do this is by passing a custom child. So basically, if you just read the documentation, you will see that there are certain props that is passed down from the flip button that you can use when you define your custom React component. And so you can turn flip button into basically anything that just handles the state logic of a checkbox or radio. And so here you can define your custom logic and custom component there. One thing I also want to mention is the sortable list component, because it's also kind of cool. You can sort stuff. It's pretty nice. And one thing I want to mention about the sortable list component is also how you customize it, because also that's very common. You might have a UI where you have something that looks like this, where we have a few items and the user has to be able to order them and also to edit them. The way you do this is by using the listeners object that is passed down from the sortable list and passing it to some type of handle where you pass down the listeners. And this is very important because I see this quite often, is that you have a sortable list and you have some type of user input. It should have some type of drag handle in that case. Like, you should not input in the same place where you drag. You should have a separate drag handle, and you do that by passing the listeners just where you need them to be. And I also went to mention a few worthy mentions whilst I'm at it to show off some components in Northlight. I want to show off the carousel component. If you ever have a carousel UI, you can do that. I want to show off the clickable component. Also important to mention, if you have a component, it does not take an onClick or is clickable by its own native behavior from Northlight. You can wrap it in a clickable to make it clickable. That is how you make stuff clickable in Northlight. I want to mention fast list, which is you might also run into. It's how we do virtualization in Northlight. Basically, it's just a wrapper around React Window, which is our main to-go virtualization solution at MediaTool. It's basically just a very basic abstraction that uses Autosizer together with React Window variable size list to render a virtualized list. Also want to mention File Picker. It's a pretty cool component that you can use to upload any file. Also want to mention Overflow Group, which might come for use in certain responsive layouts. For example, I can render a bunch of items and it can change. I'm gonna lower this number a bit. And it can change the number of items that are rendered depending on the amount that fits into the container. And so, for example, here we say that we have 481 items that do not fit. One more, no, actually 3 more. Intent button. If you ever want the user to confirm something before they actually do their action, you can have the intent button where the user has to hold in before the actual on timeout callback is called. The split pane, also pretty cool component for creating certain layouts where you can have a resizable layout that the user themselves can change. And lastly, transitions. Now, transitions is very nice. If you ever want to make any type of animation, you can use transition to, for example, wrap whatever your JSX into a transition, for example, a fade. And when the fade-in condition becomes true, your content will fade in. And we have multiple animations. These are all by Chakra UI. Favorite one is slide fade for me. This is used also by, for example, the toolbox component in Northlight uses these transitions. And so this might be nice in certain cases. I don't, for example, collapse might come in handy. Okay, moving on to one of the main problems, forms. And no, not talking about Microsoft Forms, not talking about Google Forms, and not talking about those forms I fill in at home. Talking about the performant, flexible, and extensible React hook form. And the Northlight form abstraction that wraps it. So, forms. Whenever you want to group a number of fields into the same state, you use forms to wrap their state. Now, Northlight has its own form abstraction that abstracts all of this away, or most of it. And you might have seen it. The basic API is that you have a form component, and then you have a bunch of fields within that form that connect the state. And that's one thing that's important to mention, is that we used to use Formic in MediaTool. And when we created the form component originally, it was kind of based around that. So if you go into the Formic documentation, you will see that the API, the way that it is used, is similar to how the current form solution works in Northlight. However, that's one thing that's very good about the form abstraction, is that it kind of abstracts this away. So we were able to move from Formic into React hook form rather easily without causing any major changes, because all of that is abstracted away by the form component itself. Yes, so let's talk about forms. It has been causing a lot of problems. Let's start by going into the actual form definition. So what the form actually does is that it just initializes an HTML form just for accessibility. But most importantly, it initializes the form provider and it initializes the form methods. The form methods are created by React hook form by the useForm hook, which is React hook form's main way of managing state. And it also handles validation on top of that. talking about that, let's talk about the API for form, because there are a few props here that are I think are important to mention. First prop I want to mention is enabled reinitialize. This is a very common issue. You have a form, you have some external value, and when that external value or state changes, you need to reinitialize your form. How do you do that? Very simple. You set enabled reinitialize to true. Basically, whenever the external state changes, the default values, the initial values of the form, you need to set enabled reinitialize to true if you actually want the form to update. Common issue. Also note that enable reinitialize is misspelled with a small e. So it has happened. One thing also, form settings. So as I mentioned, everything of the form state comes from React hook form, specifically the use form hook. And there are a lot of different options and props that you can pass on to the use form hook. Things like mode, which is when to validate, if you should validate on change or on submit. And you can also validate on blur, but it's broken. Actually, I discovered it this morning, testing it out. But yes, that is how you change, for example, when you want to validate, and you can pass this via the form settings. Also, one thing I want to mention is should trim, because this is important to mention, is that the Northlight form abstraction, it trims all the string inputs before submission. So if you have a form and you have a string and the user enters some unused white space, that is going to be removed before it's actually submitted. So if you ever have a bug where you for some reason need that white space, remember that prop. And let's talk about the corresponding field component. So every component that is usable with the Northlight form abstraction is wrapped with the field component. The field component, it really just uses the form context and passes down to the Chakra UI form control. The Chakra UI form control checks if there are any errors, in which case it will display that error. Otherwise, it will render the actual field. One thing I want to mention here is the use of the label component. It's very important. One thing that we strive for with Northlight is accessibility. And that's one thing with forms, is that every field must have an associated label with it. Let me, for example, go into the form example in Northlight. And I'm going to open this in Firefox, because Firefox has nice accessibility developer inspection. So gonna go here, gonna go to form example, and if I now inspect the accessibility properties and I go to this component, I will see in text box under relations, I will, is this the right one? Never mind, I'm gonna check a different one. If I go to this component, the select component, and I check relations, I'm going to see that this component is labeled by this label. And this is important every time you write a form that you define a label. This is a required prop, but even if you were to override this or do it in a slightly different way, that you always have a label with an HTML4 property that refers to the name of the field, so that for accessibility purposes, the browser knows that that field is labeled by that label. Now back to Chrome. Yes. I want to talk about validation because that's a very common thing you have to do with forms. And one of the main reasons why we use something like the Northlight form abstraction is to have a solution going around validation. And now there are 3 ways you can handle validation in Northlight. One of the ways you can do it, if you read the Northlight documentation, is you can do it with the validate prop. So basically, on the form, you can pass a validate function where you will receive all the values to pass, and then you can return an errors object at the end containing all the errors. Because that is how React hook form works, that it has an object that contains all the errors of every field. So if the name of that field exists in that object, then React hook form knows there's an error for that field. And I want to mention that the way this works is by React hook form's resolver. So we create our own custom resolver using this validation function, and we also have support to use with Joy schema. So you can choose one way to validate, but you can only choose one. And that's important to mention, is that React hook form knows there is an error if there is something in the errors object, and we create that errors object through different resolvers. And right now we have support for 2 resolvers, or 3, which I will get to. So you cannot combine resolvers because we do not support that. Then you would have to handle merging of those resolvers, and it does not. So you can only use one validation method as is right now. And another validation method that I want to show you is the Joy schema. So for example, you can define a Joy schema, and you can pass a Joy schema, and it's going to work as validation. Now the third method that I want to show you is the validate prop. And this is actually quite useful, and not a lot of people know about it. And basically, on every field component, you can pass a prop called validate, and you can pass stuff here. Let me show you. I'm going to go to form 1 here, and I'm going to search up the validate. And for example, for this specific radio group field, I can pass a validate function that takes whatever value it is and returns a string if it is an error or not. And you can have multiple different validate functions. For example, for a number input field, you might have something like validate min value 5, and then you can pass a message here, must be above 4. And so this is actually a very good way of doing validation because it's usually very quick, very easy. And in some cases, when you have very simple validation and you don't want to define your own custom validation function, you can just very simply pass some predefined validations here to make stuff required, to make stuff of certain length, to make stuff, and yeah, you can even make it somewhat more complex really, because you can define your own functions, inline functions here, for those specific fields. But if you do this, it does not work with any validation function that you passed on above, because as I mentioned, you can only use one validation method at a time. You cannot combine validation methods. So this will actually not work, because I think the Joy schema is going to take precedence. Yes. One more thing. Very common problem is, how do we get the form methods to move up? Say that we have our component or form, and we have some type of handle submit or validation, and we need access to the form state to make our code run correctly. How do we do this? There are multiple ways. Main way, using a ref. So if I go to the form documentation, I can set a ref on my form, and all my form state, all my form methods will be attached to that ref. And you can see that in the form component definition itself, that we use the hook use imperative handle, shout out to use imperative handle, that you can attach basically anything you want to a ref. And in this case, we attach the four methods. Say, for example, that we have a function here, a get new name, that requires that we have the four methods because we want to reset the four methods. We can attach a ref like this, and then we can use the four methods.current to get all the form state. Another way that you can get the form state up one level is by calling the useForm hook yourself. So you can import the useForm hook from Northlight, and you can call it with whatever default values you use and with the resolver. And this can be useful in some cases if you need to do some specific logic, but it should be your last resort. And in this case, you would have your methods defined up here. One thing I want to say, use form context and use form. So if you look in the React hook form documentation, you will see that there is a hook called use form, and there is a hook called use form context. What do? Very simply, the use form initializes a new form state. The use form context consumes an existing form state via the form provider. Okay, guys, if you have a component that is nested deep within a form, you can use the use form context to get the form methods, the form state. Do not call use form. And yes, to mention, use form is already internally called by the form component itself. One more thing to mention about React hook form is why we actually use React hook form. Why did we switch from Formic to React hook form? The reason is performance. React hook form does not re-render every field when the state of one field changes. Formic does. It's pretty shitty. That's a very good thing about React hook form, but it also comes with some caveats. The caveat is, if you try to set the value on a field, it will not re-render. For example, there is a set value property on a field, so you would expect that if I call this, it's going to re-render the form and update. It does not. What you have to do is that you have to either watch the field, which will trigger a re-render every time the field changes. Yeah, that is what you will have to do. Yes. But one more thing. As I said, the watch will trigger a re-render, and it will subscribe to different fields. And because we care about performance, especially in large forms, if it's a small form, we don't care. But if it's a big form, make sure that you only watch what is absolutely needed. So only subscribe to the fields you actually need. And sometimes it's enough to only use the useWatch hook. So the useWatch basically behaves the same way as the watch, but it will not trigger a re-render every time that field changes.
What's the difference between doing this and then the thing that you said with where you can set to true? I don't remember. The prop was super long.
Enable or initialize?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, no, the difference is that in the form, to clarify, you can pass initial values, and this is a required prop that you pass to your form.
Yeah.
Very common use case, you have some BFF whatever prop, you get your initial values. Sometimes those initial values change. When the initial values change, that won't reset or re-render the form.
Okay.
It will not. You will have to manually set enable or initialize to true if you want the form to work with some external controlled value as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the set value is when you programmatically set
The value of a
the
field.
value of the field right there. Okay.
Yeah. Yes. I think that is the stuff for React hook form. Let's move on. Actually, it has been 1 hour, but I think I've been pacing much faster than expected. I hope it hasn't been too fast. So I think it's gonna take about 20 minutes to finish. Do you guys want me to finish?
Yeah.
Yes? Okay, let me just bring my charger because my computer is dying. So, sorry for the inconvenience. Back into Northlight, and I want to talk about how our icons are made. Yes, so last time I tried to open this Figma file, and apparently we have so many icons that it crashes my computer's memory. It's a long list of SVGs, and these are all put into Northlight under icons in assets. All our icons are just SVGs stored within here, and then they are with one simple build script transpiled into React components. And why do we do this? Why do we turn these into React components? Well, it is so they can be used with Chakra UI. So Chakra UI has their own built-in icon component, and it accepts an as prop that lets you modify it to your liking. So in Northlight, there is an icon component. It uses the style config hook that I talked about earlier to get the styles for the icon, such as the box size and color, and renders that icon with the as prop. There are two things I want to mention about the icon. It is how do you style it and how do you rotate it. Two things that usually come up. One thing for styling is specifically sizing, which is probably the most common one, is that in most sketches it will say what icon size to use. It will say to use size small or size big, but sometimes these do not work. I don't know why. Some SVGs just don't go very well with this flow. What you can do is that you can individually set a width and a height, for example using the box size property. Also, very nice thing to mention is box size. Box size is a specific style prop used by Chakra UI that sets both the width and height at the same time. Very useful property. So what I want to say is that when you use your icon, if you cannot use the size small, medium, large, you can define your own box size. And one thing I want to mention is that the SX prop on the icon component takes precedence over the style props. And this is a common thing that I see, is that you have an icon and you have some styling and it does not work, it does not apply. Why? Because you have the SX prop, and the SX prop overrides all of that. So in this case, for the icon component specifically, remember the SX prop, this thing. And this is also where you can define colors and stuff there. Rotation of an icon, also a very common thing. If you need to rotate an icon, you can just use the built-in CSS feature, transform. So if you have seen transform, let me just put, no, not transformers. Transform, Mozilla Web Docs, you can see there is a rotate built into CSS natively that lets you turn things by specific degrees or turns. So if you have an icon and you want to turn it, you can do something like transform is equal to rotate, and then however much you want to rotate it by. Common thing with icon. Design tokens. This is one of the main features of Northlight. Design tokens are our way of organizing all the different styles that we use in the media tool application in specific variables, in specific CSS variables. The reason why we do this is because it goes in line with Northlight's purpose, which is to unify styling. We all use the same tokens, we all use the same sizing, the same colors. And it's also to be generic and easy to change, because you might have a token brand, color is equal to brand. You don't know what brand is, depending on which theme you use. In the future, we might have a Heineken theme. That brand may actually be a green color. And we have composed our tokens in such a way that they will make sense together. So you might have a token like variant danger and variant this. So when you use tokens together, they should go well together, independent of which theme the user is currently using. Right now, we only have the light theme or web app theme in production. Pinky L'Oreal is coming. Yes, we do like them pink colors. But Northlight actually already has a second theme. It has a dark mode. And you can use this right now in the production, although it's going to look ugly because tokens are not used properly everywhere, and because we do not have Northlight everywhere. But yes, Northlight does support dark mode. Everything thanks to the tokens has dark mode. And it may come to have multiple themes later on, as L'Oreal pink theme or Heineken green theme. So that is the purpose of the tokens. And how do you actually use them? Very good question. Let's first talk about how they actually are constructed. So I will show you a screenshot of a video recorded 1 year ago by Paolo, yours truly. And I do this because I no longer have access to Figma tokens. So I show you from an old recording. Basically, in Figma, we have a plugin that manages all our tokens, where the designers can create and decide which tokens we use, all those variables, and then it compiles it into a large JSON. And this is important because the core of all our tokens is this one JSON. So if I go back into the Northlight repository, and I go into the tokens repo, and I go into lib, all I will see under lib is one big tokens.json file. And this stores all my tokens, all my different variables. And there is one script called sdbuild.js. You don't have to care about what this does, but what it basically does is that it takes this big JSON and it splits it into multiple smaller JSONs, one for web app, one for tot, because this one big JSON contains it all. And then in the media tool theme provider, which is also very important because Northlight does not work without the theme provider, which provides access for all the style props and for the theming and for the style configs and for everything else. And so in every project where you use Northlight, you have to have the theme provider available. It then imports the tokens from these JSON files, and it passes them into Chakra UI's method extend theme. And so you can example here see that we have two different themes, one for web app and one for tot, and these are imported from Northlight tokens. And what happens now that we have taken these big JSONs, we have split them up, we have put them into JavaScript objects, and we fed them into Chakra UI extend theme? Well, they are available with the use theme hook and for style props. So, for example, let me go into the Northlight documentation, and I will choose to use light mode for now. I can call the use theme hook, and if I check here, I will see all my tokens, all my styling is in this one big object that Chakra uses to resolve the style props. So all my different tokens, the sign tokens, they are put in here, and for example, color.ai, or let's see if, yeah, here we have the brand color. And this is resolved to this one, because right now we have the light theme. If I choose the dark theme, and I refresh, and then I'm gonna call the use theme hook again. It's going to resolve to a different value, as you can see. Very nice. And thanks to this big object, Chakra UI is now really smart, and we can put and define, use our token names in the style props. Very good thing with style props is now that we can pass our tokens immediately into here and use them. And now comes the big question, which is, okay, which token do I use? Answer whatever the designers tell you to use. There will be in the Figma sketch which token to use. But I also want to explain you how the tokens are structured, because the tokens are actually structured into 3 different layers. There's what we call global reference tokens. There are system tokens, and there are component tokens. What is a global reference token? A global reference token is a token that is the same for all themes. So for example, blue.500 or green.500 is always going to resolve to the same hex color, no matter if it's Heineken theme, L'Oreal theme, light theme, or dark mode. Always going to be the same color. Why is this important? It's important because it means you should not use it. It's important because if you do use a color like green.500, it's not gonna support theming. It's only meant to be used to have a palette, a ground set of color, sizes, things to build the other tokens. The one token set which you will work the most with, or the one that you should work the most with, are the system tokens. What are the system tokens? The theme specific tokens. So this is tokens like brand, like success, destructive, info, AI, subdued, bg.base, bg.layer, bg.overlayer. Yes, always choose the system token if you can over the reference global token. And there is a third component type of token, which is kind of a weird outlier. It's called the component tokens. So every component in Northlight, or most of the components in Northlight, have their very own tokens because they're that special. So, for example, the select component has its own token in Figma that decides its width, its border, its everything. This is mostly meant for internal use. So if you ever have a new component in Northlight, it might be that we should add new tokens for that Northlight component specifically. And this is also useful if you, for some reason, want to mimic one specific Northlight component in styling. You can use the component tokens to get that exact styling. Yes. So that's a little bit about tokens, and yeah, you can find everything in the tokens table, all the tokens that are available here. So yeah, try to avoid these and use those tokens, and yeah, we have a ton of different shit. And also one thing I want to mention is that tokens is not only colors. Tokens is border radius, it's border width, it's size, it's spacing, it's opacity, shadows, typography, which use the typography components. In some cases, however, where you cannot use typography components, one thing you can do is that you can import the tokens for one specific typography component so that you still keep in touch and use the same styling. We even have tokens for Z-index, so use that. Yes. Basically, if there is a token for it, you use it. Okay, let's see. Let me just see. Did I miss something? No, I will come back to that later, right? Yeah. Actually, whilst I'm at it, let's talk about it. Let's mention that there are some utilities in Northlight. There is this one folder here called utils, and there are some utilities that not a lot of people know about, but that I want to mention. Most notably, I want to mention the add alpha utility. If you have to add an opacity to a token, which you may have to in some cases, if you have a color and you have to make it 50% opacity, use the add alpha hook. You still use the token, you just apply the add alpha utility to add the opacity to this one. And this also brings up the use token hook, which is, okay, I know I have a token, but, yes, Alexandros?
You continue.
Okay. Yes, which, say that I have a token, but for some reason I want a resolved value. I don't want to wait for Chakra to resolve its value. Maybe I want to resolve the hex value for the color because I need to do something with it. You can use the use token hook. So there is a use token hook exported from Chakra and re-exported from Northlight, where you can choose which set to use, in this case colors, and you can pass the token, and this might be brand or BG base, and it's going to resolve that token to whatever value is associated in the JSON. So yes, very nice. Use the use token hook if you need to resolve a token value. Use the add alpha hook. Also, one important hook, use contrast color. Very important utility. If you have a color, like a BG color, and you have a text color, you have something that is over it, you want one color to contrast well with the other color. You don't want to have dark text over a dark background, you want to have white text over a dark background. Use get contrast color. You pass a color, for example bg.base, and it will give you the appropriate text.default or text.inverted contrast color to put on top of that. Yes, Alex?
Like for example, sometimes on hover we want the blue dot 50.
Yeah.
Should we use the use alpha thing for that?
No,
Should we
because
use that?
it's not an opacity. Blue dot
Yeah,
50.
but like sometimes I haven't found like blue 50 in
Yes,
a token anyway.
I know. If the token does not exist and you think it should exist, write to the UI/UX team and we'll add it. If it does not exist and for some reason we think it's appropriate to not have it, use the reference token. Yeah, but that's if you have the right reason, it's okay, but it should not be your first. You should always try to use the system token first. Yes, and also there are some things here you can look through, like luminosity, stuff like that. Get shades to get some colors. Yes, but those are the utils I wanted to mention about tokens. And the main thing I really want to say about tokens is to use them, because they are underutilized, and that's bad because it does not work if we do not use them. Yes, let's talk about how to use Northlight with Figma. Also very common thing that I sadly see, because it's not actually that hard to work with Northlight, because most of the time in the UI/UX sketches they will tell you what component to use, what props to pass, and what variants to use, and what tokens to use. If I go to Figma, and I'm going to open up, for example, the targets Figma sketch, which is my own shape. And I am going to zoom in, for example, on this text. Say I am developing this component now, this little block. And I wonder, okay, I'm going to do this text. How am I going to do it? You can why the fuck is nothing showing up? Do I have demo mode enabled? No, what? Let me choose. Oh, there. No. Let's pick a different one. I don't know. I think there should be some. I don't know why it looks different than it usually does for me. Usually there's a dev mode button that you also can choose, but that I want to tell you is that if you select the component in the Figma sketch, you should be able to see in the right toolbox, and you might have to enable dev mode. You should be able to see which the corresponding Northlight component is, and you should be able to see what styling to use with that. So, very yes, Jon.
Yeah, I think in the chat they are saying Shift D, and it's open in the dev mode.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Shift plus D,
Mm-hmm.
and it's open in the dev mode.
Okay, thank you, mate.
Yeah, thanks, Nikita.
Yes. So, thanks to Jon, we can now see that this, for example, is heading H4, which means we should use the typography component, which is H4. And for different components, for example, this thing, we can see that this is a badge, which means we should use the Northlight badge component. We should use it with the variant saddle and with the color scheme gray. And we can even see what padding is applied here. And yeah, use this, guys. Use this. Just go into Figma, enable dev mode, and check through exactly what variant, what component to use. Do this for every typography, every text in the Figma sketch. Check that. Check this stuff. Okay. So, any questions on the entire workshop?
It's a bit unclear. Should I do what it says in Figma, or should I just make it up as I go?
You should follow the sketches.
Oh, okay. So
Yes.
sounds
And I also want to mention, because I know that there is can be often some discrepancy between the sketches and what we actually, when it's hard to follow the sketches because of some reasons, communicate that to the designers that you may need to change something. Yes, Anna?
Yeah. Does everyone have access to the dev mode? I don't think I have. Should I just request
Yeah,
access then?
you might have to request it.
Okay.
But it should be, I think you should be able to see this stuff even without dev mode, to be honest.
I usually don't. Or I get like a color, but I can't see what token it is. Maybe if I like search up the token with that number, but I mean, yeah.
Yeah, please make sure that you all you should all be able to see this, and if you don't, then try to fix that or write to us, and yeah, so we can get that done.
The reason why we don't have dev modes for everyone is that someone is requesting a dev mode, and then we pay a full seat for that dev mode, and someone is just using it, just once or twice, and it's sitting there and just.
I was not aware of this. Is there any way we can circumvent this, or because the devs should still be able to see the stuff in the Figma sketches, right?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Just want to ask something about, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I hope. What do you think about the transitions and the web performance?
Yes, I think the transitions are reasonably well performant. I haven't noticed any problems with them myself, and we use them for the toolbox and stuff. But generally speaking, I mean, and all animations have some performance trade-offs, and so, they should be used sparsely, I think. And also, it's something that UI UX designers may decide if we should use. But in some cases, for example, the slide component is required to implement some certain UIs. So I just wanted the developers to know that they exist.
yet we're also, sorry for just jumping in.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're also preparing some transitions and animations which will be handled via the tokens. So right now there can be an export from the tokens to set some sort of a transition or animation within the CSS. So that's like what we're supposed to do right now. We have some transitions in Figma, but we're not exporting them in Northlight. So I think that will happen really soon.
Very cool. Thanks for the update. Okay. So today we have covered a bunch of different stuff. We have covered the main purpose of Northlight, the structure of the repo, the documentation, how the reference pages are built, the Trucker UI theming, to always wrap stuff in layout components, to always use typography components, how select was built, a lot about the forms and how to use that, a little bit about the icons and tokens and stuff like that. To close some notes, I want you, all of you, to look over the Northlight documentation properly, and I want you all to take an active role in Northlight. That if there is something that you want to change, you should be able to go into the Northlight repo and put up a PR to change that. And also I want to remind you all to use the tokens, because otherwise I will come at night and request changes. Okay. Yes, thank you all for listening. Yes.